You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. All right, it's been a while since I've recorded. I'm glad to be back, and what a way to start. You've probably been watching parliamentary information if you're here in New South Wales about the Hunting Conservation Bill, and we're lucky enough tonight to have Rob Borsak Junior joining us to have a chat about it. So, mate, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Matt. It's good to be here.
All right, before we get into the Hunting Conservation Bill, because plenty of press about and there's been hiccups along the way, and I'm really curious to dive in and talk about those things. But what is your background for our listeners, and how do you fit into the party itself?
Okay, so obviously I'm Rob Borsak Junior, so that's a bit of a giveaway. I'm the son of Rob Borsak Senior, so in the party I'm Junior, he's Senior. I've obviously grown up around the party my entire life. I was there at the opening of the party launch back in 1995. As a young man, I was 10, 11, with my twin brother as well. And yeah, since forever, I've known John Tingle when he was alive. Robert Brown was Uncle Brownie. A lot of hunting with him when I was younger, and then into the party as well. And then getting older at school, obviously school kind of distracts you a bit, and then university distracts you as well. And then I really came back to hunting in a big way in my 30s. And I wanted to get involved in the party itself. So I got onto first of all, the New South Wales State Committee, and then I got onto the New South Wales State Executive as the deputy chair of the party. And then in April this year, I became the New South Wales State Director. So that was, we had a bit of movement with staff, and we had a state director who had to move on. So, in a party like ours, where it's so unique, where it's politics and it's hunting and it's fishing and it's the regions, it was a pretty niche role. And, I didn't want to be disappointed with the next person that we got. So I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring and jumped in with 2 feet. And Brian Boyle, who is a very experienced manager, and he was actually the CEO of the Game Council back in the day for 10 years. So he's obviously a very qualified person. He took over the interim state director role, and he ran the recruitment, and he put us all through the ringer. I worked in the public service before this for 10 years, and that was much harder than any job I ever got in the public service. The process that he ran was really hard. So yeah, I was lucky enough to be offered the role, and I haven't looked back. I don't miss my old career whatsoever. This is fantastic. The ups and downs, being involved, the disappointments. I guess it's. I really hate people that say that they love their job, because I always thought that was a myth. But I'm kind of doing the 2 things that I like the most, which are politics and hunting and fishing. So, I get up every day and I actually care. So that, that's kind of, I guess that's a blessing. Like, it's not an easy job, but it's something that I'm really, really, like, I'm excited to go to Parliament House. I'm excited to read the news. Whereas in the past, I used to just be disappointed all the time and annoyed all the time. But now I get to know who all those people are. I get to know who all the journalists are, because it's kind of my job to know more about it than in the past. So being kind of I wouldn't say in the driver's seat, but part of the team that's doing the driving for the things that I care about the most. Basically the main part of my culture, my recreational time, that is. Yeah, I'm very lucky to be doing that. And I count my blessings every day. It's great.
I'm glad you say that, because politics for me, I obviously have an interest in it. I think it's super important that most people do, because it will shape our everyday lives. And it's one thing I really wanted to ask you when we started talking about getting you on and whatnot was, do you feel there is a decreasing amount of people wanting to get into the space? is one thing. And do you feel that I'm having conflicting? So I always talk about a growth mindset, and I always talk about reevaluating my position and not just going, this is the way and I'm going to stay that way.
100%.
And I keep looking at it. And originally, I've always sort of professed, especially on the podcast, talking that we need more hunters. We need more hunters.
Yep.
And then I'm watching what's going on in the States and seeing that we now have this shift away from that over there, where you've got people like Matt Ranella, Steve Ranella's brother, who on Instagram is Hunt Quietly. He's going away and pushing that. Even Steve Ranella himself has now come out and sort of supported his brother, which has never happened, and said there's too many. Now we're losing tags. We're losing that system that, anti-hunters are buying tags and the like. Yep. And I know we're not as big here, but it concerns me here because there's more of obviously a firearm culture over in the States, and with their Second Amendment, we don't have anything like that. Do you think we need more hunters, or is it about keeping the same level of numbers because we're not getting more land and things like that? That's sort of, it's made me sort of rethink about my position at the moment, because I was always pushing for more hunters. But now I'm starting to think, well, maybe this isn't a great thing either, with especially you get more hunters, less land, or same amount of land, we start to have more issues, which could be amplified in many different ways.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and I love the growth mindset. I think, if what's the old saying, that you're not really a man unless you change your opinion on one thing every year, so because that just proves you're not locked into how you are. So yes, you know yourself, but everyone wants to be able to be open to nuance and different opinions and those sorts of things. So I'll answer that question in a couple of ways. So from the politics side, if you aren't involved, someone else will be. Now, at the moment, you have, and I'm saying this straight down the barrel, as honest as I can, all of those people at school that were in the debate club, that were in the chess club, there were all those nerdy kids who didn't have any friends, who didn't have any girlfriends, they were the awkward kids, they were the dorky kids, but they were the ones that, that weren't giving speeches at assembly. They weren't playing.
You're describing Anthony Albanese for me right now.
I'm actually kind of describing Gladys Berejiklian more, because she's the one that sticks in my mind. But
all of them.
But these kind of kids that you thought were out of mind, and there's some of the kids that went to my school that are now working their way up the ranks of these political parties. And I can see them projecting themselves into the spotlight once. They see politics as a vehicle where they can make something of themselves, basically when they were a nobody. So in the open market, they're worthless. They're not appealing. They're not charismatic. They're not any of that stuff. So they go into the sausage maker, which is those parties, as young Liberals or young Labor or whatever. They do their time. They do what they're told. They toe the party line. They don't form any of their own personal opinions. All their opinions come from the higher-ups and come from their parties. Then they get spat out the other end, and they stand for nothing. And their politics changes all the time. It blows with the wind based on what the party tells them. That's how you end up with a Gladys. That's how you end up with an Albanese. Like Albanese, if you honestly had to say, what is he? You really can't tell. The only thing I've ever heard him say that what he's about politically is he said, I fight Tories. That was what he said many, many years ago. I fight Tories, I fight Tories. So whatever they do, I don't like that. That's not a political position on anything. That's, in fact, the worst thing for politics. So if normal people who have been out there raising their families, earning their livings, promoting their culture, for us it's hunting, doing their hunting thing, and for want of a better phrase, resting on their laurels, we've all been expecting that things are being looked after, that the economy is being looked after, that our country is being looked after, that most people that aren't causing any trouble are being left alone. And then one day you find out that they're not leaving you alone because you're too busy, you're too flat out, you're too poor, you're too time poor, you got too much on your plate, and then the government's on your back as well. And that's because they're the people that are in that system. They haven't lived their lives. They haven't done it properly. They've been union organizers, or they've come through the party machine. Anyone with any charisma, they've knifed on the way. Anyone with any real leadership, they've knifed on the way. And then these people get to the leadership positions down the track, and then all of a sudden they're the leaders of our society. These people have no place being anywhere near the levers of power, but they've done their media training. They know how to talk. They know how the bureaucracy works. and all of a sudden they're in charge. And then we get crazy things like, all the world leaders everywhere, they're all bureaucratic and terrible. And then a real person who's led a real life, like in America, comes along and they don't know how to handle it. And he must be stopped because this is an independent thinker or someone that goes against the grain or against the whatever. So that's why I encourage more people, especially in their hunting, to be more politically active, because they've already got a boot on our neck. They're already stopping us. We don't have any uniform approach across the country. We can't rest on our laurels any way, shape or form. We're one disaster or we're one big controversy or we're one big catastrophe away from losing everything. We know we have no real rights here in Australia. Forget about the right to hunt that we talked about in this bill. We found out in COVID, you don't even have the right to move around. That went to the High Court. If you want to move around and leave your home, you don't even have the right to leave your home if they tell you to stay at home. That's how bad it is in this country. So being politically active is your only way out of that. So showing politicians that you can make a fuss, showing politicians that you can organize, showing politicians that you can build a crowd, build a protest, and you can be trouble for them. And if they make the wrong decision or they vote against your constituency, which is your group, then that's a bad idea for them politically. Because in the end, these people, unfortunately, because they have nothing going on outside of politics, that's all they care about is power. I'm probably being way too honest here, but that's all they really care about is being in charge or being in opposition. It's still just being in there, because out in the wider market, unless they've been there long enough and they've made enough friends and they can get a cushy job when they leave, they're worthless. They couldn't dig a ditch. They couldn't fix a car. They couldn't, I don't know, they probably couldn't even work as an NDIS worker. Some of these people have skills that are so niche. So all they care about is power, really. So that's why they fold to the community pressure so easily. Politicians didn't used to be like that. They used to fall on their swords and they used to stand for something. Now they just fold. So that's the way I read it growing up. Now, what you said about more hunters means less land. If we use that analogy in New South Wales, for example, so the private land, forget private land. Private land is access only by who you know. So that's basically you have to be connected to someone or something or some club or some place that you pay to hunt on. In New South Wales, we can only hunt on state forest public land at the moment, and not even all of them. So we have about 1.5 million hectares to hunt on, or maybe it's 2 million hectares. In Victoria, they've got 4.5 million hectares to hunt on because they hunt in national parks but not state forests. We have state forests but not national parks. So in Victoria, they have less people. We have more people. We have less land. So in New South Wales, while we don't have the political pressure or the political capital to open up some national parks or just more land, then yes, there is more pressure for hunters. But if you build up more hunters and we build more of a constituency, then we can talk about building more of a case to expand. Because if you can prove that you can do things in one area, like we have in state forests, we've proved that we are safe, we are doing things the right way, we are a safe bet doing that. And that's one of the reasons why in the Conservation Hunting Bill, the government's so open to it, because we're not a controversial system. We're a system that works, that's safe, that's good for the economy. Like, we sprinkle over $1 billion throughout the economy in New South Wales. So we have all these pluses that come with us. So in New South Wales, I would say always grow your constituency, always. And nationwide, grow your constituency. We definitely need more hunters. The bigger our industry is, the stronger we are. There's this great myth that we have a hunting lobby or a gun lobby in this country. That is an absolute complete myth. Because if we had to put a rally together tomorrow, because if some catastrophe happened, we had to put a rally together tomorrow, we'd spend time arguing about who'd be in charge of it rather than just getting on with it. So and if they talk about hunting lobby, I've never met a gun lobbyist that's in federal parliament, in state parliament. I've never met these people. Who are they? And if they represent more than one group, I'd be amazed. Like, there's no hunting lobbyists that represent, all the hunters of New South Wales or all the hunters of Victoria. Those groups don't exist. And they're certainly not gun lobbyists. It's always a recreation around it, which is hunting, which is not just for guns. It's also for dogs. It's also for bows. We never just lobby on our own. So the gun lobby thing is a big lie. And growing hunting, definitely growth. Growth is good. Growth is what should be beneficial, because then you get bigger, then you can prove that you're more important, then you can prove that you're spending more in the economy, And look, I'll tell you something now. If they're going to get rid of all this mining and they're going to get rid of all this forestry, what are they going to have left in New South Wales in terms of industry? Because us being over a $1 billion industry, that rivals meat and poultry in New South Wales. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing. Like the if you can imagine that mining is tens of billions and forestry is tens of billions, or a few $1 billion, and they're gone. There's nothing else in the economy. What's going to pick up the slack? Renewables won't pick up the slack because there's no jobs in it. It's all bought from overseas.
Yeah, look, I agree with everything you're saying. Like, it's a very interesting situation that I consistently talk about this, and the future scares me a little bit when we are looking at these things of what is our industry and what are we doing and where are we spending money to take us forward, because the AI revolution's here. Like, let's be real.
Oh, yeah.
AI is going to wipe out a heap of jobs. I know I use it in my day-to-day practice, and it does things way quicker than than people. It's about to, for me, I sit there and go, I think we're just at we're at the tiniest start of this to see what's going to happen. And it scares me a little. Australia isn't actually saying, hey, we need to shift in here and we need to start pushing our own AI and start promoting IT people and things. So I think that's the next big boom, as you're sort of what you're talking about.
Yeah, look, yeah. So they are doing some of that. So the Australian government isn't being too far behind that. But the problem with AI is because it needs giant data servers, a lot of the Australian continent isn't suitable for it because it's too hot. So places like Tasmania want to build giant AI farms so they can host this sort of stuff, because they need the right temperature and they need a lot of water, because they actually use water-cooled servers, which is part of their stupid environmental argument. There's actually lefties, environmental people that are actually they're fundamentally against AI because it's bad for the environment, because it wastes water. What? Even if it uses... Anyway, desalination exists, so there's nothing to worry about there. But
plus, if a couple of the US systems, how they're running, they're a complete, it's a circular system. So the water that steams off to cool it is recaptured and used. So you're actually not wasting any water. So with the proper planning, there'd be no issue here to complain about.
Yeah, but look, the stuff that I see with AI, yes, it can do a lot. I'm sorry, I'm not that sympathetic to the arts industry. If AI takes over music and movies and stuff, sorry, those people have spent basically only the 20th century being the top of the food chain. For the rest of human history, artists were the bottom of the food chain. So they might go back to that. So that seems like a normalization of how society used to be. So I don't really feel sorry for Hollywood if it disappears because of that. Sorry, shoot me, but I've got bigger fish to fry than what music I listen to and what movies I watch. Look, in terms of design and a lot of those middle roles are the ones that are going to be affected, I think. It's I kind of liken, if you remember, when was it? Maybe 10, 15 years ago, when all of a sudden every company in Australia outsourced their customer service to the Philippines or India. And then everyone got so cranky about that because they were sick of picking up the phone and not talking to an Australian, that all those companies had to bring all their customer service back on shore. So I think it's going to get so I think it might swing one way where it gets too much AI, where you're talking to a robot, and everyone's going to get the shit so badly that they're going to have to bring it all the way back.
Let's see if they pick up on it. I know we chatted just before off air talking about some of the AI videos you can pick up on audio and things like that, but they're getting better. There's some ones out there now, you sit there and just go, I don't know. I can't pull this.
At the end of the day, they are still tools at the moment. So, we don't know how far they're going to go. Elon Musk says that phones are going to be replaced with just AI interfaces where it's going to know all about you and what you do. And so who knows? But if the only way to insulate yourself, I believe, is with those regional jobs like mining. So if you're not mining and manufacturing, then what are you doing? Because AI will just completely delete you, because your speech therapy degree is not going to be worth anything because AI can do it. So will that shift us back to more working class? I don't know. Is that a bad thing? No. 2 generations ago, we had the working class. Working class wages could get you a mortgage, a holiday a year, could afford a car for your family, could send all 5, 6 kids to school, all on a factory worker's mortgage. So someone that built cars for a living. So if we went back to those simple jobs, but it paid the bills, I don't think anybody would care. I don't think anyone would be because everyone now wants to change the world with what they do rather than focus on their world. So that's if we had to get back to more humble kind of jobs, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I'm not going to tell my kids they can do anything and they can change the world. That's not really realistic. I'd rather them have an amazing world of their own first, and then if the rest of the world comes calling, then they answer, rather than the other way around. Which again is a problem with politics. Everyone grows up thinking they can be the world's best politician, and it's like no, politics is meant to call you, not the other way around.
It's a very interesting one because I've said it before. I think for me, a lot of politicians are people that probably shouldn't be politicians. And I think you just sort of said that as a calling. You've got a lot of people that, whatever drives them, whether it be that power, a lot of the time I look there and go, were they bullied at school? And that's their, sort of way of getting it back, and that they feel that they're, worth something.
Yes.
And you see a lot of that. No, that's my personal opinion. And I sort of sit there and sometimes go, would AI be a really good way, as, we talk about some of the deranged viewpoints of, Greens, Animal Justice Party.
Yep.
I've been watching some of what Emma has been putting out there and just shaking my head. There's no real world scenario that plays out with any logical sense. And then sometimes I think, well, potentially this AI revolution, is that going to start to be able to call out this rubbish? And, I think that we saw that with the hunting conservation bill and some people's positions against it, and what they were raising. And you sort of just went, we saw that in Victoria when they tried to ban duck hunting.
Yep.
And we got the data and everything there, and I think they did a fantastic job of getting that data and getting specialists in to show the numbers were skyrocketing and the benefits of that. Yeah. Do you think getting into the hunting conservation bill, and it was one thing, and I wasn't, I did a podcast on it and just myself talking about it, and I was trying to look at it from different angles of where we are. And one of the things that sort of jumped at me, especially when it got put to the inquiry, is have we got the data to really show what we do as hunters for the community? We've got state forests. Now, you can argue that that's, let's say that it's 90% accurate, because I know people don't want to give up honey holes. I know people might not tell the exact reason because they don't want people going to their forest. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So we've got that. But that's really only the data set we really have there, because private land hunting, we haven't got any data that is combined to come across. So it was one thing I was really concerned about with the hunting conservation bill, is that had we done the legwork so that if it did go to the inquiry, that we would be sitting there going, well, you know what, here is all the information. Like I know we had Ned McKim come down and talk, and he's done an amazing job up there with tracking data for pigs.
Yep.
That was one of the things I felt, is that have we gone off a bit half-cocked for that, because that would just strengthen our position? Or have you got that and we haven't seen it?
Well, see, something you have to remember is we don't have a statutory authority for hunting in this state. They have one in New Zealand, they have one in Victoria, they have one in Tasmania, they have one in the Northern Territory, I believe. So it's their job is to promote and, in some cases, regulate. We used to regulate as well, but this conservation hunting bill says we don't want to regulate this time. That can stay with DPI. But that doesn't just, yes, it oversees public land, but it also promotes hunting in the state. So the secondary effect is that it brings together those licensed hunters and it brings together private landowners. So in New South Wales, ever since the Game Council was gone, axed, cancelled, which was, there is a lot of the public story about that is not 100% truth. There was something very dodgy done on purpose. The government back then wanted an excuse to get rid of it because Liberals did what Liberals do, and that's backflip and go to water. And it's a huge gripe of mine ever since I was a boy, when I realized that if you don't want to do anything to conserve guns and hunting and the outdoors, how can you be a conservative? If you don't conserve that, how can you be a conservative? So that was one of the first oxymorons that I figured out about politics when I was a boy, that we don't have any real conservatives in this country. So that's one of the reasons why our party had to exist, because we had the so-called conservatives wanting to attack that stuff, which didn't make any sense. And then once you realize that it's a city-country divide and that the left and right is just completely irrelevant, because it's about, especially in New South Wales, where if we didn't have the Blue Mountains, we'd be a different state, because we wouldn't be so separated. It'd be much easier to get out in the bush. It'd be much easier to get out in the regions. People would live in the regions and work in the country, in the city, just like they do in Melbourne. You can live 40 minutes on acreage and have cattle and chooks and shoot, and you can just drive into Melbourne. Like we just can't do that here. But if that geography was different, then we would be different. So with that setup that we have, since the Game Council got axed, the Greens NGOs have taken over with their advice to government with how to manage feral animals on private and public land, and that has pushed landowners away from hunters. So hunters are no longer the solution. So if you want to get something done on private land or meet someone, like I said at the start, you need that connection yourself, to build it yourself or know someone that has built that connection. Now, nothing you do to knock on doors or drop in letterboxes about I'm a hunter, I can help, nothing can compare to a well-funded Greens-backed NGO, which gives government advice about how to manage animals on private and public land directly into the veins of the government. And that's the only advice that they get, and that's the only advice that they follow. So nothing beats that. So we've come along with our bill and we've said, we have a solution here. We have a government that's never going to get out of debt, and they're getting bills all the time for more helicopter shoots and more poison drops and that sort of stuff. And we come along and say, well, we have a citizen-backed solution. This is not a big government solution. This is a citizen solution. It's going to cost you absolutely nothing compared to the hundreds of millions of dollars you've been paying for the last decade. And they're saying, that's a great idea. We'd rather spend the money that we're being asked for. We'd much rather spend that money on schools and hospitals and infrastructure and those sorts of things. So that's why they love our bill. But then when it gets into Parliament, they turn it into, they don't know how to manage animals on public land because they haven't been doing it. And all they've had is state forests. And in state forests, those numbers are this low. And then, as you mentioned, Ned Makem comes along with the Great Australian Pig Hunt, which is the best data set that we have. And it's the most recent because it was just last year. All government data is at least 3 or 4 years old. This is recent data. It's university backed. It's confirmed. There's data. They were doing genetics. They were doing everything. And across the whole country, they took over 4 million pigs, over 1 million in New South Wales. Now, any numbers that they throw at you for the state land, that's fine. But we know that there's over 20 times more private land out there in the state. So the numbers that are being achieved on the private land, they're the ones that matter. So they don't want us to be talking to those people, because if you look at their numbers on the private land, which conveniently never came up, they only attacked, if you notice in the inquiry, they only ever talked about public land. And as soon as Ned brought up what they did on private land, it was just a kind of oh, wow, great, go away. Because that was a data set that they didn't like. So they do what the politicians do, which is just ignore it. They don't refute it because there's no point, because it's not a win for them. So they just leave it alone and then go back to their attack. So your question about do we have the data? Well, we don't have the accurate data because we're not required to collect the data on harvest, because there are no harvest reports on private land. So all we have is anecdotes. So that's why politicians, we had the second debate restarted again for the bill a couple of weeks ago. And one of the politicians who lives around Goulburn was saying, I spoke to Barry or whoever it was down the road, and he said that, pigs are about to make their way into Goulburn Township for the first time ever. Never happened. Now, someone will say, oh, that's all nonsense. That's not this. We're doing this. We need more money to fix this, and government won't back it, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, you're not encouraging people to go out and do it themselves for free. That's the real problem. But it's like, well, you haven't got an NGO that's done a study that can prove that, and blah, 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 blah. So that's why they're trying to say that this is not scientific. But we know you don't need an NGO that's funded to tell you that the sky is blue. We can see the sky is blue. We can see it with our own eyes. So that's basically where we're coming from. We're just living in reality. And at the same time, we also know these animals are never going away. These pie in the sky lies about eradication is never going to happen, because these people know they'll always be in a job as long as there's feral animals out there. They'll always be on the gravy train, while they keep saying, just like they keep saying that the world's coming to an end with climate change, but it's not. So as long as they keep saying that, the industry keeps going and the gravy train keeps running. So they know it's not going anywhere, and anyone that comes to upset that paradigm or upset that gravy train has to be stopped. And that's where we came along and we did it. So we were the target. We're bringing some common sense solutions, and they don't like it. They turned it into a bill about, we want to have an NRA style gun lobby. Like, that's what they turned it into. That's how desperate they were about trying to knock this thing over. And we all know that's complete rubbish, because that means that in New Zealand they have an NRA style gun lobby because they have a statutory authority, same as Tasmania, same as Victoria. Well, they never said boo about that. What's his name? Walter Mikak never went to Victoria when they just 2 months ago or 3 months ago opened up 2 new national parks for hunting. He didn't say boo about that, but he got brought up here to New South Wales because they saw us. Oh, these guys are upsetting it in New South Wales, so we need to stop them, because that'll get out of hand, and we can't get our hands around that, because the government will start listening to the actual truth about what's going on, not what we're pushing on them. You know, like, they talk about science-backed and all these sorts of things. Through COVID, everyone started losing their appetite for the expert class, being told through studies, this is what you have to do, because we all developed a phenomenal bullshit meter. Everyone's bullshit meter grew and became better, and we all understood what's reality and what's someone just telling me something because, you know, and they just say that's what the science says or that's whatever. But the smoking companies did the same thing or something similar. They all had their scientific studies that said smoking's perfectly fine for your health. So we all know science can tell you whatever you want. And again, COVID put that on supercharge. So, you know, it's normal people living in reality versus a class that doesn't want their, and we're calling it the failed conservation paradigm that they have. They don't want that upset. So we have to be stopped. And this is why all these lies, all the distraction, bullshit about deals done about this and deals done about, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. We came along at the right time with a common sense bill, and they didn't like it. It's the worst thing that can happen. They were saying horrendous things about hunters, horrendous things about good working people with families who have a valid recreation that's been going on since the dawn of humanity. And they're laughing us off and saying that we're trying to normalize that. What's more normal than that? There's nothing more normal than that. Eating, shitting, and hunting is the most normal thing in the world.
Okay, I agree with most of what you said. Data can be manipulated exactly to what you like. And I think we're getting that with the Invasive Species Council and their some of the outlandish statements I heard them bring up in regards to that if you have hunters around, it makes it worse for private shooting and the numbers decrease and blah, blah, blah. There's a couple of things. Don't quote me, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but it's sort of sitting there going, mate, I don't even know what you're talking about there. That I think that's, again, that misinformation and pushing from there.
Yeah, and look, we had to unmask them a little bit, like just to zero in on the Invasive Species Council. We've done a bit of press on this, but we looked them up, and they've since changed their website since we uncovered this and exposed it. But the ABN, the Australian business number for the Invasive Species Council, is based out of Victoria, in Carlton, in Melbourne, which is just down the road where all the lobbyists work in right down the road from Parliament House in Victoria. And they work in a building called the Green Building. That's what it's actually called. And we know that their CEO here in New South Wales, or the CEO of the Invasive Species Council, used to be a staffer for the Greens in Macquarie Street. And his new company works in the Green Building. Now, in that building, it's a big office block, and all these offices are filled with these green-backed NGOs. And in two of the offices, one of the offices in that building is for the Greens leader in the upper house in Melbourne, and another office is the Greens leader in the lower house in Victoria. So we have the Greens with these people that used to work for the Greens, working for these green NGOs in the Green building, pushing their policy advice straight into government. So the Greens don't even need to be in government to get their policies through. So if the government adjusts them, in whatever way, they still get what they want. So it's only Greens that are pushing this stuff. We don't have the same kind of funding for what we do. If you look up all the donors for all the parties, the Greens get something like $5 million a year in donations. Like, we can't match that. We just can't match that. And they can spend that on whatever they want, on campaigning, on studies, on funding, on propping up NGOs, whatever they want. We just don't have that kind of galvanized movement that they have because, again, we have an inherently individual pursuit. We go out hunting on our own, for the most part, with our families, with our small friend groups, and we do those things alone. We don't do it like, yes, we have clubs, but when it comes down to it, we practice our pursuits, even fishing, on your own. You have one gun. It's better when you're hunting on your own or in tiny groups. So we are more individualized by nature, whereas their side isn't. They get together and they protest. They get together and they do things. They're in Marxist clubs. Like, Lee Rhiannon, who used to be a Green senator in the upper house, she got given an Order of Lenin for her Marxist, bloody achievements over the years. So these people are well organized. They're in big political, they've always been politicized. And we just don't have that because we're busy. And because they're from the other side of politics where we just want to be left alone, we're not out there attacking people on a daily basis. That isn't our jobs. Our jobs are real ones where we're getting on with things. And it's not our agenda to tear things down. So inherently we want to conserve what we're doing and we want to build things. So we're builders, they're destroyers. And the destroyers always have been stronger, especially in this country.
So how do we go around that? Because I agree with everything you're saying again, because I've said it all the time, is hunting is very factional and there's a million different groups, and to try and get the sheer numbers and support, we have a few things against us. You mentioned sort of like going to rallies and things like that. Yep. I'll be honest, with my job, probably couldn't do that. Then I sort of look at the current protests that have happened where it's turned to, pretty ordinary, and you've got the police coming out saying, the leftist sort of ideology people are throwing things, and it's becoming a bit like what we saw over in the US. I think people get a bit nervous if you're a firearm owner that you could lose your firearms doing that. 100%. And I think rightfully so. So I think we're weakened in that position as well. How do we go about, because my other great concern, and I know you guys were talking about John Ruddick, the Libertarian, who went against the bill. We thought we had the numbers to go forward, and then it got pushed to the inquiry, and he was sort of the deciding vote. There was a couple others in there, and won't go into the boring details for that, but there seems to be a lot of smaller right sort of parties. You look at Rennick, you look at One Nation, Libertarian, you guys. Are they not competing for the same group of supporters? I sort of have said this a couple of times, and I've had John on the podcast, and I really liked his idea at the time where there was, let's get everybody into the same room. Let's stop competing against each other. Let's work out, you guys have got 7. Where are you running your 7 in that area? Who's the best candidate? Who do we think can consolidate the votes and sort of become a coalition? Because that's sort of what the Liberals and the the Nationals sort of do. Are you guys hurting like all the parties because you are fighting for the same small group, which could be one larger group, if you weren't fighting like a candidate from One Nation or a Libertarian or et cetera? So in New South Wales, that's where we were founded. And this year we actually celebrate our 30 years in New South Wales Parliament. We actually had our 30-year celebration up at Cundabung on the weekend. Now, the reason why we've lasted 30 years and why we will last another 30 years are because we are shooters, fishers and farmers, and that's it.
We're not seeking to form a coalition with anybody else. We were born out of an angry constituency that was not going to be left alone. And yes, we have people that lobby us, and yes, we have policies outside that. But fundamentally, that's what we're there for. So One Nation comes along in 1997, I think it was, and they thought they were going to run the country one day. They were going to form this huge revolution, social, cultural, economic, everything else, on the back of mostly social, people's anger, and that's it. Whereas, well, now we've seen that a bit with the Libertarians as well, because they've been around for 10 years. They've been doing the same thing for 10 years, saying the same arguments with their last guy, David Lionhelm. It's all been prosecuted out in public before, and people don't want what they're selling. So I'm not surprised that they're saying, let's all come together, because if they haven't got any of the runs on the board and they can absorb other people into their movement, into their coalition, whatever you want to call it, then of course they're going to want that. Whereas we've hung around, we've been that vulture on the shoulder of government for so long, working so hard because we've stuck to what really matters to us. We haven't evolved out of that. We haven't drifted away from that. We'll always be there for our core values, for our core constituents that have been with us from the beginning. And that's what really separates us. So we fundamentally, we don't want to run the country. For those other parties, what we do as hunters, because it's hard to explain to someone who doesn't see it all the time, but we are absolutely in the nitty-gritty of firearms, of fishing, and regional issues. We are absolutely in the nitty-gritty of that. The Liberals aren't, the Nationals aren't, the Libertarians aren't, One Nation aren't, legalized cannabis aren't, animal justice aren't. They'll have their own patches. So if you want to, let's say we join with One Nation, or we join with Libertarians, or with Family First, what these other parties are, who say that they're on the right, and then all of a sudden people would say, oh, shooters, fishers, farmers are just joining with somebody else. There's no separation there. So that brand that we built as being specialized on our special interests that we've always been in on, and we join with a party who those issues are at best peripheral for them, just so they can get into power, that's not what we're interested in. We don't care who's in power. We're going to hold them all to account the same way. We're going to make sure that they all know who we are, what we're here for, and what we do. And every time they try and have a crack at us, we're going to bite back, or we're going to, politically bite back, politically fight, and politically make life hard for them. Because, like I said, if you think that the libertarian, people love, because they said all this in One Nation many years ago, so it's all been done before. People have very short memories when it comes to politics. Someone comes along, has all this, has this great firearms portfolio. I'm going to get everything back, and it's going to be pre-96, and it's all going to be great, and blah, blah, blah. And then that person flashes in the pan and they're gone. And then all of a sudden, all those firearms promises that you had are fucking meaningless, and you wasted your vote. And then here comes the next one, and they want to do the same thing. And firearms, again, is a peripheral issue for them because, like it or not, we don't have a policy on Palestine, Israel. We don't have a policy on Ukraine and Russia. We don't have a policy on immigration. We're there for the people of New South Wales, for our New South Wales policy, and to worry about those people and what affects people in the regions. That's what we're there for. We're not trying to run New South Wales. We're there to represent our constituents and defend the absolute hell out of them because, politics is two kinds of people that want to be left alone and people that won't leave them the hell alone. So we're there as a vulture on the shoulder saying, leave us alone. That's fundamentally our job. So I hear what you're saying, but, John Ruddock doesn't have a firearms license. Does anyone in One Nation have a firearms license? Have they ever shot a gun? Have they ever had the police come and do a safe check on you? Have you ever had shenanigans happen when you deal with the firearms registry? Have they ever been stopped by when you're fishing out on your boat? Have they ever been stopped by a cop and tossed over because they think someone might be drinking or checking or measuring your fish just to check everything when you're back on the dock? Have they ever had those sorts of things happen to them? We have. That's what we do all the time. We know that better than anybody else. So, and that's what we're laser focused on all the time. So those other groups give you plenty of lip service. That's what politicians do. They give you lip service and they're in it for themselves and they make bold claims. We're going to replace the Liberals. We're going to run the country one day and we should form a coalition to take over. But then it'll all go to shit because they can't agree with each other and they'll all have to decide who's in charge. Now, we're just not interested in being a part of that.
I think I might have miscommunicated what my interpretation of what they were trying to do is. It wasn't that you and them are going to merge. Each party is their own party, but when you guys are not going to go up against each other. So if you had a candidate running down in, say, Nowra, that they would not put a candidate up in Nowra because they want to maximize the votes for your party to get into, and basically try and get more right-leaning parties in, and then you guys have more power, not to be done together because you're all different, obviously, but to not fight each other for the same supporter base. Because let's be real, we are not going to get, your party is never going to get a Greens or AJP voter coming to vote for you. However, if you're up against a One Nation person, if One Nation weren't there, there's a high chance that those guys are going to support Shooters Farm Fishers. And I think that's sort of where they're. Yeah, and I get what you're saying, and I agree, because I do love the fact that you guys are there because you are wholly, as you said, laser focused on the needs of shooters. Love it. And I'm not going to dispute that. You are the best party for shooters, hands down. I think I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I like what you're saying. My thing is, how do you grow you guys? Because that's, I know you don't want to run the country or anything like that, and that you're there to focus. But would it not be more beneficial to be able to get more people in? And how does that happen too? Because I think, from my perspective, and I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, I feel that we do have a lot of little more right-leaning parties that are fighting for the same sort of supporter base, which means the funding, whether you guys are getting it or someone goes, I'll throw it at One Nation, or I'll throw it at Libertarian or Rannick or whatever it's called, then that pool is smaller, whereas you've got the Greens. And the Greens are the Greens. You know, they might struggle a little with the AJP, but realistically, people that are all about the environment are going to throw their money at the Greens and not the AJP. So you're sort of, I guess, fighting with one hand behind your back is sort of the point I'm trying to sort of make.
So I hear what you're saying, and that all kind of comes out at the election time. So obviously, the seats that we target more are the seats where the Nationals are, because that's been our tactic in the past, because we think that there's no true right-wing alternative or centre-right alternative to the Nationals. We famously call them the lazy Nats because they just do as they're told by the Liberals, and that's a crying shame. And that's, in some cases, it's been almost criminal the way people have had to be at the end of that, of those Liberal-centred policies that simply don't resonate beyond the mountains and further west. And that's where we did have some success back in 2019, where, taking those seats, and prior to that in Orange. So those other parties know that's where we're going to run. Those other parties know where the Nationals are, we will be. And we'll be there holding their feet to the fire, making them better, making them know what's going on, and letting them know that they have constituents of ours in their seats, and they need to be better, and they need to choose, if we can't win them, they need to choose people that are going to be better for our people. Otherwise, we'll replace them. Well, I hear what you're saying. We're not running in the same seats. That has happened in the past, where parties have said, I think I've got a better chance. We might actually flip this seat or whatever. That all comes down to the election time, what the leaders of each party say to each other and decide. You can have all the best plans, and then someone comes in and goes, no, I'm going to win all of it. Someone like like we saw it in the federal election, someone like Palmer United Party comes along and says, no, I'm going to do the whole lot. And then, they get members and they don't get enough votes and they split everything. So there's always going to be another ego that shows up, or someone's ego that tries to get in the way of doing that anyway. Like just focusing on Kiama as a good example, because by-elections are a good way to get the pulse of the electorate. That by-election was a joke. There was 11 candidates, and the Greens had the number one spot, and they did not get a big vote. They ran fourth, but they didn't get a big vote. And they had the top spot, so they should have got a big vote. Felix ran fifth or sixth, which was fantastic. Libertarians got 1% or something. AJP got 1%. And then within that, in those various areas within the electorate of Kiama, Felix's vote was a lot better, and then in certain areas, Felix's vote was a lot worse. So, and in most by-elections, it goes against the government. In that one, it was resounding for the government. So if we look at the current pulse of, and that's a coastal seat too. So it's not a real regional seat, but Felix had a great vote. So for us, that's encouraging for us that we can make some headway in those seats. Now, something good about our political system is if you're in the race and you get a decent result, then they encourage you to be in the race. They don't say winners only, but if you can get, a certain percentage, you can claim back on that based on how much you spent. So there's incentive for more people to run there. So with somewhere like Kiama, Felix getting just over 5%, that's huge encouragement for us that we can have some headway in coastal seats with a good candidate. It was a very short race, but with a good candidate in a decent area where people are a little bit fed up and they don't like the current, right-wing situation or centre-right party that's doing their thing, they will look at other centre-right alternatives. And, I would argue we are the only centre-right party in the New South Wales Parliament. The other parties tend to go way further than we do. Like in terms of the Libertarians, they are by definition far right. So, if people are wanting more of a centre-right alternative and we can provide that, those other parties that you talked about might not be our direct competitors. So it all comes around to the flavour of the electorate. It all comes around to the area itself. As I said, in the past, coastal seats weren't so much for us. There were a select few, and we tended to focus on the west and the north and the south of New South Wales. But, we'll obviously have to do our research. Other parties will do theirs. And then everyone will talk to each other about, where they think they're going to run and, where they think the chips are going to fall, where the seats are going to fall. That's all political scuttlebutt that is, it's luckily it's not my job. I just deal with the party admin. So all the politics is done by the politicians, thank goodness. But I hear what you're saying, and it's been done in the past where people have said, like the Liberals and Nats don't oppose each other, So I hear exactly what you're saying. They only maybe overlap in 1 or 2 seats out of the whole 93. And even then, one of them wins clearly. They don't really split the votes too much. So, but then we have other by-elections. Like we had Northern Tablelands a couple of years ago where Northern Tablelands was only 4 runners and we got 20-something%, So it all just depends on each race, who declares, what you do. Like it's a little bit like like a gunfight at high noon. You really don't know who you're going to face until he's got his hand on the pistol. So we kind of have to wait until that happens, until we make those decisions. But look, we're open to talk to other parties. The other parties are the ones that don't have the long memory like us. Like, we always think back 30 years. We have a very long vision of what our party should be, of what our policy should be. We don't do any flash in the pan changes. We're not a party of egos. We don't have celebrities in our party because we don't think that's the way to go. I personally think that's a big downfall of parties that choose celebrities. I don't think that there is a successful case of some celebrity joining a party and it working out well for them. So that's also something that we do. And people, because they're famous, they think they're smarter than everyone. And, like I said, they push their ego around and tell the other parties what to do. And we just find that, keeping your head down and doing what you know gets us more success. So look, that could happen. That could happen. But having said that, we have for 2027, like we've already started our search for the campaign. We're calling it the Big Beautiful Campaign. We're hoping to run in, 50 seats, which is just over half the seats in New South Wales. Obviously, we're probably going to stay away from Sydney for the most part, maybe 1 or 2 in the west. But other than that, we're going to hit the regions hard. We're going to hit the coast hard. We want to find good candidates that know all about local issues, because that's all that matters, is that people in their local seats know their issues and the government listens to them and they get what they need. Because that's what it is for us, is the city country divide, which is, hunting is just a microcosm of how they don't understand, because it doesn't happen in the city, and that just plays out in the regions and the coastal seats. So that's our push for the campaign.
Yeah, look, it makes sense. You got to spend your time and effort in places where you're going to get the most return. I mean, I think that's probably a science to it, what you got to work towards. So I get where you guys are coming from for that one. All right, let's get back to the hunting conservation bill, because I'm curious, what are the predictions of how it's all going to play out?
Well, we obviously heard a lot in the media about the things that they didn't like. So even though we have a lot of common sense in there, most of the bill is common sense. So talking about we need to do yes, we need a statutory authority so we can promote hunting. Hunting needs promotion because, like I said, over $1 billion in New South Wales spent, that's not spent in other states or other countries, spent here, mostly in the regions. People buy their equipment in the city and they spend their leisure time and all the other stuff in the bush. So in there, it talked about having an authority to promote hunting, and that was the worst thing in the world. Oh my God, they're going to have a propaganda unit. Well, if at the moment we're spending $1 billion and there's no promotion, just imagine how big it can be if we can start promoting it. Like I said, our industry rivals meat and poultry. Like, forget about fishing, that's way more. But if we just talk about it, just hunting, and it rivals meat and poultry, you can't go past a butcher without a poster outside saying get a bit of pork on your fork, or those like when you go to the bush and you buy your eggs, it has buy local eggs, or local eggs made here from down the road, or whatever like that in the supermarket. Whereas you go to a gun shop or a hunting store here, all the windows are blacked out. You can't see anything, can't look at any of it. So just with how it is now, it's already chugging along. It needs promotion. Like I said, if the other industries fall on their ass and hunting needs a bit of pumping up, then it'll all be too late. So we should be promoting this. This is a good pastime. It's a healthy pastime. It's an ethical pastime. And the people that don't know anything about it because they live in the city, they can't wrap their heads around that. So that was the first thing that they were attacking, was a propaganda unit. Okay. And then it was, we obviously had in there suppressors, because we all know any country that's serious about conservation or really putting a dent in animal numbers, you need to use a suppressor. It doesn't lead to an uptick in crime. It's not related at all. Even in the USA, people do not commit crimes with suppressors. They're a statistical anomaly. You can look it up yourself. What's the crime rate like with suppressors in the US? It's not. People use handguns. There's surprise attacks. That's like over 90% of the gun crime. We know that. But again, common sense has nothing to do with this. So they all think it's going to be like James Bond, where, like you're holding the gun and it's silence. They're still calling them silencers, for God's sake. You can't, we know it operates like PPE, like personal protection equipment. So it's like wearing earmuffs. It's like wearing eyeglasses. It's like wearing high vis. Having a suppressor makes it safer for your hearing. Like, we've all been to hunting clubs and everyone's deaf from shooting, right? Any other industry, they would promote it. In Europe, it's in the UK and Ireland, it's compulsory. In New Zealand, it's not compulsory, but they encourage it, and they list it as PPE with the safety equipment, with first aid kits, with hearing protection, with eye protection, with high vis. That's how they list it when they describe it in their Firearms Act, in their Firearms Safety Code from the police over there. But that became a Hollywood thing all of a sudden, and people are on the news shooting guns in a US range, shooting pistols with suppressors. It's got nothing to do with our bill. They also threw in their night vision goggles and body armor, which was just plucked out of thin air. Okay, I can't do anything with that. If your imagination's going there, I can't help you because it's not in the bill. So they want to amend that out. The authority, they don't want to amend that out. But then also the right to hunt. That was something that we saw as obviously we don't have any rights in this country, but we want some sort of recognition. So the bill would have that recognition in there, that hunting is valid. Hunting is something that is an ethical pursuit. Hunting is something that is not inherently bad. That was the aim of the right to hunt. But for some reason, that turned into, that's going to Trojan horse in a right to bear arms. We again know that's a lie. Like, we don't have inherent rights in this country, and that would not set up a legal hurdle for anyone saying, I have the right to bear arms, or I have the right to hunt on your property. There are countries in the world where you do have a right to hunt. Like, I was hunting, I'm just looking at here, I have a roe deer that I shot in France back in 2017. Now, they have a right to hunt. They have a system there which has been operating for over 1,000 years in France, where someone buys the rights to hunt the animals in that area, and they have walk-on access to everyone's property. That's a country that has the right to hunt. That's not a right to own a firearm. That's only a right to hunt. Now, we're not proposing anything anywhere like that. And in this country, we did not develop, or we did not progress, or we did not grow, or whatever you want to call it in this country, with a situation where people had a right to walk onto anyone else's land. The animals that were on their land weren't theirs, but they could do, for the most part, what they want with them, right? Especially the ferals. Not the natives, because they're protected, but unprotected animals, they could do what they want with them, right? They could catch them, they could breed them, they could shoot them, they could kill them, they could eat them, whatever they want. So they turned that into a right to bear arms, and they scared the government into that. And they, brought people up to lie about it to the Liberals, and the Liberals wet their pants and said that they didn't like it now because they don't want an NRA-style gun lobby. Again, it's all bullshit, but that's where it went. And then we also had initially, and one of the things that pushed it to the inquiry was obviously the AGP was against it. Obviously the Greens were against it, and then the Libertarians. John Ruddock said, "Well, my ideology is that I'm anti any more government. I want small government. So you want to have a minister for hunting and fishing, so I have to be against that because that's my ideology." But it's like that would give the constituency who is seeking to win over some proper representation in government. You wouldn't just be peripheral, you would be important. You would have your own minister. That is such a good thing for us. That would be such a win for us. And that was something that he wanted to amend out. He had something like, there's 130 amendments proposed. He had something like 60 or 70 amendments that matched the AJP and the Greens that he wanted. So it's like, you can't claim to be pro-hunting while you're attacking the bill. Oh, but that's just my ideology. So, well, if you fall back on your ideology, then you're gone. Then that just proves that you're not anywhere near the center. You have to be able to move with things from the center. If you're stuck in your ideology, you're way off on the boundaries. And the AJP is no harm to animals. Boom, they're off on their far left. And boom, I don't want any more big government, so I'm over here on the hard right. So it's like, well, then, how can you represent the people that you're saying to represent if you're going to come up with just ideological arguments? So, and obviously that pushed it to the inquiry. And after the inquiry, no great findings were found. The inquiry had said, what it said. The witnesses said what they said. It was a bit of a joke that we had to take some of the people seriously. It was in a lot of ways offensive that we had to give airtime and we had to take them seriously, and people's time was wasted talking about wanting less government, but they put us through that government hearing, and the government had to give oxygen to the Cat Protection Society, the RSPCA. What the hell do they have to, like a gun control alliance? What the hell do they have to do with managing feral animals on public land and private land? What the hell do they have to do with that? But we had to listen to those people, and we came out the other end of it, and now it's back in the House and it's being run in private members' time. So that only means about an hour a week each week. So they had 2 weeks of that. So they're getting through that second read debate, and then they've got 3 more weeks in November. And I think they also have a reserve week if they need to. So I can see, because obviously the government doesn't want to go to, because they obviously bring bills up on the slate that are ready to go. And when they have these big breaks, I think they like to get business done before the break. So fingers crossed, hopefully the government will be proactive in saying all the bills that are on the slate, we want to just get them sorted. So hurry up and have your debates, hurry up and have your amendment debates, hurry up and have your amendment committees and all that sort of stuff. And then let's just get them sorted. So hopefully, ours is one of those bills that they're pragmatic about, and that they might say, yes, let's get it done. Let's get it sorted. And let's just get it done, because it has been way too long. And this is one of the bills that's been held up like that, just full of all the nonsense. So look, we're confident. The Nationals have split with the Liberals on this. They've said that they are going to support this bill, obviously with amendments, but the amendments that are put in there, I think that the main ones that are really important are going to get up. And the government's also made positive noises about the bounty schemes that we've put in. We could be leading the country in bounty schemes here. And again, that's a citizen-based solution. So everyone's talking them down. But if you have some sort of incentive not to walk past that cat when you're, like, let's say you're a professional shooter and you're walking past a cat at nighttime. Those people that use suppressors, legally, if they're not walking past cats and foxes and they're knocking them out and they're doing bounty schemes, boom, they can benefit from the bounty scheme. So in that sense, a rising tide lifts all ships. And also it's going to bring people back together when it comes to hunters and private landowners. So with that level of common sense, I don't see there being too much of the bill carved out at all. I can see some of the crazy amendments getting voted down. I think we have the common sense arguments won, so that these I think there's 130 amendments that have been put up. But again, that's the AJP and the Greens saying on every single part of the bill, erase, 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 erase. So when it says amendments, that can be amendments multiplied. So it could be the same amendment multiplied. So it's, yeah. Look, I'm very confident that we've now got it's well and truly been aired in public, and it's well and truly been aired in the media, and it's well and truly been aired in the parliament. So now it's basically time for them to stop mucking around and just get on with it. So look, I really hope we have something to celebrate at Christmas time. They have reserve weeks, they have reserve sitting days, and hopefully they use them, and hopefully our bill goes on there and we can all have a very happy Christmas time knowing that we're finally going to get our hunting authority back, which is something that we need. It's something that we deserve, and we can start expanding our positive demonstrating of hunting on public lands. Like, it can't be understated that we've had 20 years with 0 fatalities on public land, 0 serious injury on public land in hunting programs. But all they want to talk about is the numbers of animals that have been shot. But if you can't demonstrate that you're safe, nothing else matters. And we've definitely demonstrated that. So if we can do that, then who knows what happens down the track if we just keep proving how well we can do things. And then we grow. And then, as you were asking me before, if we run out of land, well, where else can we go? Where else can we expand to? Where else are there areas that are not being managed properly? Because it keeps raining. We're not having another drought. The animal numbers keep expanding, and the government's not getting any. They haven't got a money tree. The federal government might, but the state government doesn't. So someone's got to do something about, national parks as well. And just a side note, that all the national parks in New South Wales that have these helicopter shoots and hunting programs, they all have, well, not all of them, but there is a select few in particular that have supplementary ground shooting programs, and they recruit hunters with R licenses, and they run those and they train them through the SSAA, and then they get them into ground shoot in the national parks. So ground shooting programs are already happening now safely with training in national parks by request of these other government groups, because they can't kill the numbers that they're saying. So there's already effectively pilot programs going on now in New South Wales where they're hunting in national parks safely and effectively. So who knows what the future holds?
All right, so a couple of things there. Before we get into national parks, because I know there'll be people jumping up and down asking me to talk about why that was left out. But I know I taught it today in class that we were looking at the disability adjusted life years for hearing, and it's approximately 2 to 3% of our what we call dailies. This is all according to AIHW, the Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing. Yep. So if you look at that, that's 150 to 200,000 people a year. So it's a significant burden on the population, and suppressors seems like just a sensible solution, because, as you said, it's just PPE.
Yep.
What are the chances that that's going to get up? Because I'm highly, I really am reserved. I think that'll be the first thing that most people rip out of the bill.
I agree.
Yeah. So the question, and I know a lot of people have said this, is national parks left out, suppressors in. I would feel, and I think from talking to a lot of different people, the feeling is national parks would be more achievable than suppressors. Why one out, one in? So
not to insult anybody that comes to that conclusion, because it's a good one. Like, it's a good question. It's just that we've aired that in public previously. So what happened was, during the O'Farrell government, we did do a deal. We did a deal for the poles and wires, so we could get basically open up hunting in a few select national parks as a pilot, and then go from there. Looking to open up more national parks. On the back of that, obviously the Liberals lied. The Liberals backflipped. They ended up cancelling that. They sacked the Game Council, and we lost. And we were an absolute bee's dick away from losing any hunting on public land in New South Wales. They all but killed it. We managed to negotiate our way out of that. So at that time, the scare campaign that was run was so severe that it was, something that rivals what's going on now. So look at the campaign we've copped without talking about national parks. So we anticipated that we would get a backlash like this. But if we'd have national parks, I believe that they would have said, that's just too crazy. You guys are off with the fairies. That's never going to happen. So we presented suppressors as PPE. We've always introduced suppressors as PPE. So suppressors as an argument is, I believe personally, not at the same level as arguing to get into national parks, because we're pushing that as safety equipment that should be part of the training, and you can put serial numbers on them, because as we all know, you can get your hands on them now. They're just not issuing. And that's another myth that went through, that we're watering down gun laws. If this bill went through in its entirety, it doesn't change the Firearms Act. The Prohibited Weapons Act is completely different. You've got slingshots in there. You've got crossbows in there. You've got BB guns in there. You've got paintball, all in there in the Prohibited Weapons Act. So, and now zombie knives are all in there in the Prohibited Weapons Act. So they're separate to the Firearms Act. So we were talking about a prohibited weapon that is available under license being moved into, simply requesting that people can use their conservation hunting license as a genuine reason to attain one. So that was simply saying, open up this bureaucratic process. Whereas getting us into national parks was a much, much, much bigger task. And it was, I believe, going to be a much, much harder thing to prosecute. So getting our authority back was the absolute big one, because at the moment we don't have the recognition, we don't have the cultural support, we don't have the promotion of hunting. And as I was saying, they always say politics is the art of the possible, and this government made every indication, stay the bloody hell away from national parks. So we want them to listen. We wanted to get something, and what we're getting is big, don't get me wrong. But at the moment, this government doesn't want to talk about national parks. They just dumped that giant koala national park on us just a few weeks ago. They're buying a lot of land and they're locking it up. And if we were trying to stick our nose in there to say, because they have this net zero thing going on, and they're wiping their backsides with their numbers by buying land and just locking it up. So if we want to say we want to get in there and hunt in there, that's not something that they're open to right now. So we're going with what was possible, and what was possible was what we proposed. Because, you can always come at things like a bull at a gate. You can always do that. But we want to get things done. And that's one of the reasons why we've been around so long, is because we're a pragmatic party and we go for what we can get. We always go with what's possible. And we're never outlandish. We're never extreme in what we go for. So, like I said, the government said, look, I'd love to say, fuck you, let's go for the lot. Let's go for everything, but it wasn't something that was on the table for us. So we left it alone. It was just better politics for now to go for that. Now, the fact that we're gaining ground on something that is considered a right-wing issue, do you have any idea how rare that is? The right side of politics never gets wins. This is us potentially growing a right-wing recreation, a right-wing culture, something that is on the right only. That doesn't get promotion anywhere ever. So the fact that we're even able to have that conversation and grow that and boost that is just already, it's huge. And we've seen that in the media campaign, how hard they attacked it, because it's something that's on the right, not on the left. And we're simply talking in their terms. It's something that we deserve. It's something that makes sense. It's something that's whatever. But as I said, the government said, stay away from national parks. So for now, okay. And then that doesn't mean that in the future we don't have a crack at national parks. Like, look at they were having a go at the numbers that we shot in state forests. Have a look at the harvest report for Victoria in national parks, 168,000 deer. Imagine we could achieve those numbers here if we had national parks. It's there, it's doable. We just don't have a government that's willing to listen now.
Get it. Makes sense. And again, that's why I wanted to ask the question, because I wanted to know what the logic was behind. You made an interesting one there talking about prohibited weapons, talking about the Prohibited Weapons Act and crossbows, because technology has advanced significantly. If you're looking, as we probably all do, we follow what's going on in the States. Yep. Looking at the crossbows now, and they're scoped up, they're super powerful. Were they ever a consideration, being that, say, suppressors get sort of knocked on the head another silent, quiet way that's pretty damn accurate now, can do probably, you can shoot some of the shots and things I'm seeing out easily to 100 meters. Not a bad option as a secondary sort of option. Were they considered?
Look, what you're using is common sense and things that will be great for us. And in politics, unfortunately, with the city-based political class that we have, they're not interested. You can't even make a water pistol that looks like a real gun. So if there's anything that looks scary, that looks flashy, no way, you can't have that. They put the bloody Adler in category H. Pump action shotguns are in category H. It's not a semi. So like, just because they look bad, you can't have it. Like, why is my slingshot a prohibited weapon? We had to fight to get paintball guns taken out of. They were listed as firearms. Firearms. If you get airsoft, that's a firearm. An airsoft pistol is a firearm. So if we can't get airsoft, if we can't get paintball, paintball and slingshots back and BB guns, they're not going to give us crossbows.
I get it. It was an interesting sort of side note. If that's the big thing with suppressors, just as it makes a sense or a logical other alternative. But I understand.
I know what you mean.
You're dealing with people.
They'll talk about some kid can shoot someone. Like, even in the debate recently, they were saying how one of the guys said, "I support this bill." That politician who talked about pigs coming into Goulburn, but he brought up, but I don't support the suppressors because can you just imagine that guy down the road in Croydon who was shooting out the window of his second story on a main road? Just imagine how much more damage he would have caused if he had a suppressor. So we can make one with a water bottle, and the gun he was using was illegal, and he wasn't licensed. So what does that have to do with any of that? But that's the level of thinking that's involved with that. So us bringing these things into the argument, bringing them into the public discourse is really important, because we haven't had a decent discussion about suppressors. There hasn't been good, consistent messaging about the nuance of firearms with things like suppressors in a long, long time. Like, people didn't even know that you can't have slingshots and BB guns and airsoft. I used to work as a parole officer, so I know people that were getting locked up for having an airsoft gun they ordered on Temu or whatever, because they had no idea. It's like, yeah, that's a firearm. Did you know that? No, it's not a firearm. It shoots plastic pellets. No, it's in the Firearms Act that it's a firearm. Oh, okay, great. So that's the level of idiocy that we're dealing with, unfortunately. Yeah, because when I was a kid, all that common sense was there. And then all these people that came in, like we talked about at the start, who just want to take things away and don't live in the real world, and are just there to be politicians who just want to prove themselves all the time. Just take. And then before you know it, you can't have slingshots. Oh, because someone might hurt themselves once, so that has to go. It's like, come on. So yeah, look, I wish.
Like we all do. So,
and by the way, they have crossbows in New Zealand. You can walk in off the shelf, grab a crossbow, off you go. No license required. BB gun, no license required. Slingshot, no license required. So when they talk about we want to have USA-style gun laws, I'll settle for New Zealand-style gun laws. Thanks very much. Forget the US. What about New Zealand? They have great common sense gun laws.
Well, lastly, before we go and wrap it up, I'm glad you brought up New Zealand, because I sort of always sit here and think we do a really poor job of it. Is that New Zealand has really embraced their cultural heritage with the Māori, and we don't seem to push the same level for our First Nations peoples. And I, as an Aboriginal person myself, I consistently sit there and go, it is part of our culture to hunt. Where is that here in Australia? Not just for Aboriginal people, but for all people of Australia. If we talk about being true to our cultural roots, why is it New Zealand is so good at doing that and we are so poor at it? Because it's one that has sort of irked me the whole time, that you look exactly what you're saying, everything you just said there. I think New Zealand has a fantastic system. I do think it is on the back of sort of, that combination of First Nations and, and others, and we don't seem to have it. How did that play about?
I'm really enjoying talking to you, Matt, because you have such common sense, well thought out opinions, and it's a breath of bloody fresh air compared to the way that politicians talk. They're the people that are supposed to be in charge, and you have you're way more thought out and better than them. And I always say to people, unfortunately, common sense has no place in politics, because just focusing on the Aboriginal situation, we have in our bill that the right to hunt was in there for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, that we all have a right to hunt, that this is our land. And that's something that all the parties have been against, and it's being amended out. So they don't even want to recognise Aboriginal people's right to hunt. Now, you would have seen it. So you would have seen at the inquiry, Nathan Moran from the Metro Lands Council, he came and gave evidence and talked about the importance of it for them and how this bill's going to help them. Because at the moment, yes, they have their land council lands, but they're not allowed to do anything with it. So talk about, yes, they want to develop it and they want to do all this. They can't even hunt on it. They can't set up a program with friends, locals, whatever, because they're, red taped out of it to manage the ferals on their own land. They've got to pay the helicopter crews and baiting like everybody else. They don't want to do that. They want to manage it themselves. No, you're not allowed to. So we could have a situation where, I know in America they do it, and in New Zealand, with permission, you can hunt on Maori land as well. We don't have any of that here. So yes, in the Northern Territory they have that, but not in this state. So could you imagine if Aboriginal people here with the Lands Council money, because all the land councils are sitting on lots of money, they're sitting on lots of land, but they can't do anything with it. Just imagine if they wanted to set up hunting reservations, just like the Indians have in America. How good would that be? And they could cultivate their own populations of whatever the hell they wanted, and they could have awesome hunting areas. That would be a huge industry. That would be awesome for them. That would be real money that doesn't sit in the bank gathering interest that they can't spend. That would be working things, locals working there, people from the actual landowners working there. If they wanted to contract it out, fine, they can just earn the money. If they want to work there, fine, they can build careers, they can build skills, they can build communities, whatever they want. So this affects them as well. And that's something that we had in there. Now, what's different about New Zealand? My wife's a Kiwi. I've always had a lifelong affinity for New Zealand. New Zealand is basically a semi-rural country. They don't have any dual carriageway highways. Their connection to the land, it's impossible not to know someone that hunts, fishes, or tramps over there. Like, there's a reason why the first person to climb Everest was a Kiwi, because that's just in their blood, is the mountains, or they call them hills. So when it comes to the Maori as well, they're obviously, like a lot of the Maori land over there is mountain land as well. So these are people that are still connected to their land, and the white people are also still connected to their land. So they have that shared culture when it comes to hunting, tramping, and the outdoors. Whereas here, we like to call ourselves an outdoor, like we have an outdoor culture or an outdoor people here in Australia, but we really don't. We have a beach, and we have, so our culture is a beach and a football field or cricket field culture. That's our culture. Australians don't go in the bush because they think everywhere you walk, a snake's going to bite you. There's going to be spiders in your tent. They basically think it's the Amazon rainforest. That's what they think the Australian bush is like. They think it's not safe because they watch too much Crocodile Hunter, right? But that's just not the reality of how it is. So again, the geography in New South Wales, in our biggest state, with our biggest city, is that people do not holiday to the bush. They holiday up and down the coast, or they go overseas. So many Australians, that's what they do. Or they go up the coast in other states. That's what they do. They don't go inland. A lot of them haven't even seen red dirt. Like most Australians haven't been to Uluru, for example. That's just how it is. We're just not connected to the land like that. We're not encouraged to do that. It's not promoted like that. And like most people don't even understand how it works with Aboriginal land here. They know there's native title. They know they have some land. And they have no idea that they can't do anything with it. They have no idea. So your question, why is it different? I think because the Kiwis can't get away from the bush, and here we're kept away from the bush. So people that are, more connected to the bush are separated. So that's just how it goes. Like, we're way too urbanized, way too urban. And we aren't even that urbanized, but still, Sydney's a sprawling city that goes right up to the mountains now and all the way down past Camden. So Camden used to be bushland many years ago, and now it's completely suburbs, everything. I'm sure there's still the odd snake running around, but still it's pretty urbanized. So as long as that's how it is, that's how it's going to be, unfortunately. Like, I wish it wasn't. I really wish it wasn't. Because I'm very lucky. I spent all my childhood. We didn't go to resorts. We didn't go to fancy restaurants. We went to the bush. My formative years as a teenager, I was either at scout camp or I was in a hunting camp. Scout camp with mum, hunting camp with dad. So that was, it's rarer and rarer. Or sorry, it was rarer and rarer for me. Now we're seeing a lot more of that coming out with social media. And if we get, and not to just come full circle, but then if we get this bill up, we can start promoting that culture again. We can start promoting the culture of getting out there. And, it was awesome talking to Nathan after he gave the evidence at the conservation hunting inquiry, because I said, that's so good that you spoke about what you said and you talked about how you can't do those programs, and the government support that is there for you is only limited because it can't be on your land, and you can only employ like the crumbs that they're throwing you guys to train 2 or 3 rangers is just not good enough when you guys can be making huge industries out of real Indigenous land management. And then, so I said to him, so when are we going hunting? And he's like, I'm a big pig hunter. So, whenever you want. So, the Aboriginal people still have a real connection to the land. Even though he's Sydney Metro, he still loves pig hunting. And I love that. And you don't get that, with most people in Sydney, which is a constant source of frustration. But yeah, so that's a long way of saying, unfortunately, New Zealand's got it better than us. And that's why their gun laws are better, because they've still got farmers, they've still got shooters in their parliament. Like, if you look at who the people that own firearms in our parliament, the people representing the firearms, or so they say they are, some of them don't even have firearms licenses. So, like, they don't even know. So if you don't have the lived experience, then how can you relate? How can you relate? And in New Zealand, the Prime Minister over there, he owns a farm, he shoots. They all go duck shooting. There's a fantastic hunting show over there. It's a magazine called NZ Hunter. You might have seen it. They have a hunting show which only airs in New Zealand. Every now and then they put a clip up on YouTube, but their hunting show is the best hunting show I've ever seen. It's historic. It's like they go on historic walks across the Southern Alps and in the North Island, all this sort of stuff. They hunt everywhere and they do everything. But something that's really amazing about them is, it's just left me now. Oh yes, every season that they do, the last episode is duck hunting in the Marais. In the Mai-Mais. So they're in the Mai-Mais, and every season they get a Kiwi celebrity in the Mai-Mais with them hunting. And the season that I watched a couple of years ago, and we were there for Christmas, they have this famous comedy duo who's the equivalent of, say, what's his name, who does Dame Edna? What's his name? Barry Humphries.
Yes, yep.
So Barry Humphries is famous from the 70s and 80s doing characters and dressing up and doing stage shows and doing characters. There's these 2 ladies. I think one of them has, no, they're twins and they're still alive. They're called the Top Twins. That's the Kiwi equivalent. Very how Barry Humphries is very Australiana. They're very Kiwiana. That sort of thing. 70s, 80s, very famous. Over there, they give out knighthoods and they give out damehoods. So one of the top sisters, she was Dame whatever Top. Dame Linda Top, that's who it was. And so she's New Zealand, arts industry royalty, and she's there in the Mai-Mais shooting ducks with these 2 hunters. Can you imagine if we had someone like Russell Crowe shooting, like going out pig shooting or going out what's her name? Like, our culture is not on the same level as theirs. Whereas they've got someone who's, Dame Linda Top, standing there up to her knees, holding 2 swans, going, how good was that? And comes marching back in and chucks them in the Mai-Mais, and off they go decking ducks. Like, I wish we had the level that they had, but we just don't, because we're way too urbanized.
No, look, I agree. It's one I've said so many times in the podcast, is that imagine the opportunities for, our traditional owners to be on their lands, running, guiding, running, it would be a win-win for everybody. And it's just unbelievable that we don't go down that pathway. So,
and you know what? It might bring us together. And maybe there's people that don't want to bring us together. Maybe only the left wing wants to be the party that says we represent Aboriginal people. And that was something that really snookered them when Nathan was in there at the inquiry. They didn't know what to do with him, because he was talking positive things about us and talking positive things about hunting and land management. And they were like, whoa, this can't be right. He's supposed to be against this. He's supposed to be with the Greens and the left-wing people. He's like, no, I'm just with my culture, and we have a shared culture, so we're on the same page. Yeah, it's a crying shame. So maybe they don't want us coming together. Maybe they don't want us having common sense solutions, because it might eat into their control.
Yep. Look, I would not put it past people to be doing that to retain power and to make opposition weaker. So, Rob, thank you for coming on the podcast, mate. It's been insightful. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation tonight. So, mate, keep fighting the good fight, and hopefully we'll do this again shortly.
Yep, fishing season's coming up. Summer's here.
Oh, I know. I was away last weekend, and hopefully coming up we'll be out chasing some salmon. So, happy days.
We've got the Kingfish Cup this weekend, so we'll be there doing the safety boat. I think we'll be up at Avoca this weekend. So,
okay, yeah, cool.
Yeah, anyone's around, come see us.
Sounds good. All right, mate. Well, enjoy. Best of luck, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, mate. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob. All right, listeners. Bye for now. You've been listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. Thanks for tuning in, and can't wait to catch you next time. But in the meantime, if you want more, you can find it at linktr.ee/Australian Hunting and Beyonds. That will give you our YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. We'll catch you next time.